Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing Dom Mason. Dom is a business and IT transformation consultant, turning around and delivering difficult or failing projects. He's also a regular sea and pool swimmer, training most days. So this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to welcome Dom Mason. Hi, Dom.
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for inviting me on the show today.
It's great to have you here, Dom. So for our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Worthing on the south coast of the UK, and I've got two delightful children, a boy and a girl, the king's choice, as they say in France. And my older son, Loic, is 15. And apart from being a mathlete, an all-round scholar and a lovely guy, he has severe food allergies and is immunocompromised. And then my daughter B is 9, and she currently does 8 sports and excelling at karate. She's nearly a black belt, and she's currently in weapons training. And so, as you can imagine, for a dad, I've got the cricket box out the attic to protect myself during her more vigorous sessions. And I look forward to schooling her at home in karate over the coming months. She also plays the cello, and she is best friends with our family Springapoo Puddles, who we call her therapy dog. So that's an interesting dynamic. And I live in the middle of Worthing, my wife Emily, and I'm very lucky at the moment because I have a contract with a global business, an engineering firm. So I'm up in the morning with the Asian parts of the business, and I stay on into the evening with the American parts of the business. But I work from home 95% of the time, and now 100% of the time. And I've been a digital delivery lead / right-hand man for CTOs and CIOs for about 7.5 years through my own business, and before that through a string of London agencies. And I love swimming. That's one of the things about me, I think. In the pool near my home, and also in the sea, which is 3 blocks away.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much in that introduction. Tell us a bit more about the swimming, just to start off with, because before we went on to the recording, you were telling me about the role of keeping fit in your own resilience and health, and it'd be a great place to start, given we're right at the start of the pandemic as we record this.
Yes, should we get up and have a bounce around to some to one of my spin playlists? Maybe not. So my fitness journey is an interesting one, because as a kid I had chronic asthma, and me and my friend Andrew, whose dad worked at a bakery, were always at the back in cross country at school, and always nagged by the cross country teachers. And in those days, I didn't have an inhaler. I was just chronically ill and very, very skinny. And then as I got into my early 20s and moved to Brighton for Polytechnic and then on to uni, I started swimming and doing a whole host of exercises: Aikido, karate, running, swimming in the sea, and pool training with a couple of friends of mine. Then, overworking in my late 30s, I damaged my spine quite significantly, but in one specific area, which meant that it was agonizing pain for about 3.5 years. But in the end, when I went for the operation, easily fixed. So it wasn't a massive fracture. It wasn't multiple discs. It hadn't collapsed in on itself. I had no additional factors. So I was able to get fixed. So basically, Had a major injury when I was a kid, had chronic asthma, then got really fit, then crippled myself over training for triathlons, and then had to go on another learning journey. So about 9 years ago, and it's funny looking at you in the video in your loft room. I was lying in my loft room on my back where I'd been for about 7 weeks, and lifting two 3-litre milk cartons full of grit, and remembering I got them full for the first time and could lift them above my head to do a chest press. And I've slowly built up my exercise regime from there, entirely in order to build my resilience. I mean, I may have built up, Bob Fock status, which is body off Baywatch, face off crime watch, but that is entirely entirely independent. My fitness regime is to do with physical resilience, and as a consequence of that, a degree of mental resilience.
How does that come to play in both fatherhood and business, would you say?
So in fatherhood, I guess the first thing that springs to mind is it gives me a great deal of energy. So you would think that the opposite would be true, and I would be knackered all the time. But in fact, when I go swimming in the early morning, 6 till 7:30, or in the evening, 7 till 8, I can do one of two things. First of all, after the swimming, I'm full of beans. I'm very, very happy mentally, and I've got energy to continue. Not energy to swim or play rugby, but, to continue with the kids or do the school run, a positive frame of mind. But also, if I know I'm going in the evening, I can look forward to it, and I can postpone my, I don't want to say happiness, but fulfillment for the thing I'm going to do, because I'm going to do it in the future. And therefore I'm more resilient to deal with the now. And a lot of the stuff I do with my kids is inherently positive, and I feel positive about it, and I'm enjoying it. But inevitably, when you do something even that you enjoy, such as going through a GCSE marking scheme with my son for the 9th time, it becomes a grind, and you've got to paste a smile on and be positive for them. And it's the first time for them, and they're making mistakes that they need to grow by, and their brain needs to be elastic and learn. They need to see I'm supportive, right? So you have to then go, right, okay, I'll do this now. My reward will be just throwing myself into the pool later and meeting some buddies for a coffee outside. Nice. And then the second part, which is about in business, again, it gives me two things there. It gives you a sort of, I find it easy to detach from conversations. I don't find myself getting so emotionally attached to a conversation. And I don't know what that is. It might just be the Zen state of swimming, or it might be that, I've got a low heart rate, or it might be that I'm sort of, I can just switch states more easily. But I find myself getting less attached, less wound up. And so I make better decisions or make better interventions in business meetings, and therefore get a better rep. And your reputation is everything. And then again, I think secondly, if you go swimming, there's no phone. I don't have one of these overcomplicated MP3 players that you can plug into your ears. I don't listen to music. There's 5-second break between lengths. There's nothing in the pool. And so I can go through the gears after a day's work. I can go, so literally go through the gears. If you've got time, Matt, I'll work through them. So number one is you start thinking about work problems, and you can listen to people who you've been talking to during the day. You can replay conversations. You can wind them out like a bit of wool and find a bit of a golden thread in there and think, okay, I'm going to park that. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to take that action. Or actually, I did misrepresent what Debbie was saying in that further meeting, and I need to recompense for that. Not in a guilt trip replaying what if she said, I said, they said, but in a kind of problem solving kind of way. And then the second phase I go through is to start to tackle maths problems. So my brain, after say 20 lengths, switches to what was that maths problem we had, right? So they were talking about a supply chain issue, and that's 3.7 million. But actually, if we reduce those nodes, so I'll kind of tackle those logic and maths problems. And then my ability to solve those maths and logic problems fades away. And then in a deeper state where I'll kind of have some nice feelings and thoughts and all that, and I might think about something my son said to me, or something might pop up from my deep memory about, oh my God, I used to love going to Corfu with my granddad. I remember the smell of the diesel engine on the boat and all that. And then the final state is you're just swimming. There's nothing else. Obviously, the final state doesn't last very long because somebody will tap your feet, or somebody will start having a shower with pine shampoo, and you think, oh my, so you can snap out of it quite quickly. But those are the gears I would go through multiple times up and down that in a session. It is beautiful. And, you know, epiphany, I think, is maybe over describing it, but that's what I do it for. And that is a huge benefit in business, because you're just, I don't know, more Zen sounds a bit hippy dippy, but, you know, I think you're just more resilient, less reactive, more centered, better listening skills, and all of those things bring benefits.
Yeah, definitely. I totally get that, Dom. I think it's such a brilliant example. I mean, all my coaching these days is about helping people get to that state of mind that you're talking about, where you have clarity, quietness, that you have better insights, better decision capacity, you react less emotionally to the nature conversations. I think that's amazing what you've just shared.
And, you know, being a coach, I guess, how long that takes, right? There's no quick fix.
Right.
If you think about, and I go to coached swimming sessions, and they'll say, you know, when you put your hand in the water, it's slightly off center. It's about 3 degrees up or 3 degrees down, or you're not cupping your hand in, or you're not pulling properly and all that. If you focus on fixing that one thing, all of a sudden your legs are dragging behind, or you can't breathe properly. And so you work on one thing at a time in a session. You slowly build up your skills to then swim properly when you thought you could swim before, and then you can move into a different state of mastery. I mean, you're the coach, right? I don't want to go on about it too much, but that's just my personal journey. But it's a long journey, but each stage of it is so rewarding. You stick with it and move through the gears.
Well, I think that's, you know, been an inspiring story for many guys listening, and anybody listening who wants to see not only the physical benefits, but the mental benefits of an exercise routine. I just want to switch, Dom, back to your introduction and talk a little bit about, Loic is 14 coming on for 15, I think you were saying. And
yeah, that's right.
And he's immunocompromised. And I imagine that's been a lifelong condition, right?
Yeah. We found out, so he's a perfectly healthy kid for 1 3/4 years, been eating all the same food, little bit of eczema, sick occasionally, well, you know, not signs that you could spot, but just, you know, kid stuff. And then Em was feeding him hummus, which of course has chickpeas, garlic and sesame in it, all of which we now know he's violently allergic to, or became violently allergic to at that point. And then she rang me screaming, saying I'm driving him around the doctors. Very, very lucky at the time we lived in Hove, 2 blocks away from the doctors, pulled up to surgery, pulled him out of his chair in the back of the car. The doctor came out, recognized what it was, went back in, got literally an old school syringe, filled it with noradrenaline and hit him with that, and called the blue light services, and that was it, saved his life. And I didn't see that, so I'm incredibly distressed just talking about it, as you might be able to hear. So I kind of imagine what my wife went through. And when I finally got to the children's hospital where he was, his face, the swelling had come down. He'd stopped literally oozing from in his nose, his mouth and other areas, but he was scarlet, like you wouldn't believe, like he'd been immersed in boiling water. And that was the start of our anaphylaxis journey, really. Never heard of it before. Didn't know that lupins, which as far as I'm concerned are a flower in my mum's garden, were ground into wheat flour in France to make cheap donuts and biscuits. Didn't know that was related to the cashew, which in turn is a ground nut, and so on and so forth. So, wow. I mean, some journey.
Yeah, amazing.
as a dad, you can probably imagine, right? Your first reaction is to protect him from everything, but he's got to eat. So, I'm not making a pun to say weaning, but we literally got to wean him back onto foods bit by bit, and knowing that at some point he's very, very likely to have a reaction to something. Pea protein hidden in foods. I mean, we were actually, I do genuinely feel we were very lucky in the choice of allergies that he's got, and also as he's grown up, the foods that he wants to eat and chooses to eat. So he doesn't have a dairy allergy, and there's dairy hidden in everything. Doesn't have a wheat allergy, and again, that's a nightmare for a lot of parents. Doesn't have an airborne allergy. So we've got friends through the Anaphylaxis Society, his kids are allergic to airborne egg proteins. They've never been away, never been on a ferry, never been on an airplane. Their holidays are at the bottom of their garden camping, both of their kids, homeschooled. So I can't even imagine what their lives are like. And then we've got another friend who's touch allergic to natural latex. So when you hold a banana mass, it feels like not tacky, but sort of there's a haptic kind of sense to the banana. Yeah. That's natural latex on the outside of the banana. So she came home from school one day with a hand mark on her arm, like The Exorcist, and they thought someone's smacked her or bullied her or God knows what's going on, or put acid on her in the lab, and wearing gloves and all that. It turns out somebody had been holding a banana and held her arm and said, come and play jump rope with us or whatever. So yeah, but Loic loves steak and vegetables, and I always say there's no nuts or egg in steak and vegetables. So we're very, very lucky, and he's the size of a house, and plays hockey and basketball at school, and I can't get past him in the corridor. So, but at the same time, he's got a lethal set of allergies which could take him out at any point.
Well, I mean, what's been the impact on you as a dad with that, Dom? Because I think you kind of alluded earlier to that want to protect him, and I guess I can imagine easily falling into a state of anxiety. I mean, obviously you've been living with this, all of you have been living with this now for 13 years or so, but have you navigated that sort of choppy water in your own life of not kind of getting so kind of caught up in the worry about what might happen?
Two major things. One is I don't vocalize it, which is healthy for the family situation. But if you then do the old classic, I'm just going to take that worry and put it behind the door and lock it away, you can imagine you'd go chicken oriental, or it just becomes a kind of the boiling point. So you have to train yourself to not intervene in his decisions, not intervene in my wife's decisions, not intervene in something he's eating. I mean, when they're a tiny baby, it's different, right? But I mean, now from the age of 9 onwards, and you've got to understand, he has a risk profile. It's very, very different to my own, and you have to live within that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to live with it. And obviously, the consequences are fatal. So it's very, very, very difficult that you have to do that. Otherwise, are you going to intervene in every meal? And if you can't taste everything, so you can't intervene, and you just have to take steps backwards from that. And if I was watching over what my wife was saying and my wife was doing, and she was doing the same to me, then our relationship would disintegrate, because it's like, hang on, where's the trust? Don't you trust me? Well, I do, but, and we all know that but, right? Well, I do, but it means no, I don't. So you have to resist that tendency in yourself, first of all. And also there's a limit to that, isn't it? So we were recently in a lovely hotel in London, fantastic evening, and it was very, very noisy. And we've got a lovely Spanish waitress, and she's talking us through the delightful foods and all that, and very, very caring about Loic's needs. And then she came back and said, but we've got 2 fryers. One we do squid and other things in, and we only do that in it for various reasons. It's a rapid turnover fryer. The other one is for things that we deep fry, and it's for white fish and whatever they put in there. And my wife had already said to her, well, as long as it's in the second fryer, that's fine. Right? She said, yeah, fine, and all that. And And I got really, really anxious and just said, oh, I wonder if they know what the second fryer is. And then went, well, I've been through it with them. And then I couldn't really hear what she was saying, and I hadn't really heard what the waitress had said. And then I just started I just repeated what Emma said, and I said, can you see how I'm just questioning that? And then she said, well, why don't you go to the kitchen then? I said, well, I don't want to go to the kitchen. What if I call her back over? We talk about it together. And it's a noisy situation. And it's actually, I remember it because it was recent, but it's one of the very, very few times where I've just got up and left. Only because it was like, you have dinner. I'm just going to walk away because I can't stop myself intervening. I don't know. And I would just, even though, at that point, even though you're saying, I really care about you, but I'm just going to go for a walk outside and then I'm just going to come back. Then it's like, but this is a very special family dinner and you're walking away. Can't you keep a lid on it? And it's like, I don't think I can. I think I just need to walk away. So amazingly what we did, I went upstairs. I was going to get my coat on and then go for a walk for 20 minutes. The whole family came upstairs. And then I literally remember holding my son's hand and kneeling down, just going, I'm so, so sorry for my behavior. Please don't let my stupid behavior ruin your evening. Please can we go back downstairs? Please can we go back down to the table? Please forgive me. I just wanted to have a nice family evening. And then everything just evaporated and we just went back down to the table. But you've got to build a huge amount of trust and communication between the four of you to get to that situation where people can genuinely see you're not being an arsehole. It's only because you care. That I had so much credit in the bank, thank God, that situation didn't just dissolve more so I'm going for the train and sod you and, for God's sake, this isn't about you and all of those things. And again, that's a long journey, right? That's a sort of, it takes you a while to get into that mode. So that's the first thing. You've got to, even if you want to intervene, you've got to resist that within yourself. And I think the second piece is that it's awful when they're 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're putting everything in their mouths. They're going to parties and people don't understand, and there's hummus everywhere and all this stuff. And then it gets to a state where they're reliant on you and they love you so much that you can just tell them to do anything and they'll do it. But then you've got, whether it comes in at 11 or 17 or 19, there's a point where they're entirely independent, they do what they want, and they want your money to do it. And at that point, you have to be really careful you're not controlling and corralling and putting them in cotton wool, because then they're just not building the skills to go into the world on their own and be both independent and safe. And we're in that phase at the moment, right? So it's, it's interesting.
I mean, it's such a brilliant story you just shared. I think you're really touched by, your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing that, Dom, and also the wisdom in what you're sharing. And, I'm just wondering, because I've spoken to quite a few dads now for the podcast, and I'm at a different stage. Apparently my child's a lot younger than your two.
Yeah.
But it really, I'm full of admiration for dads who seem like you to have that real insight as to developmentally what their child needs and to be able to go into the world and make something of their lives. And I'm just wondering where that, if you have any sense of where that insight comes from. Is it something to do with how you were brought up? Is it some place you got to by yourself?
Well, the way I was brought up was basically, I'm from Wolverhampton, as you can tell by my thick Midlands accent that I'm not using in the podcast today. I can lay it on if we want some Brummie, but I prefer to reserve it for family funerals. And my childhood was basically go down the school with all my mates to the infant school, go down the road with all my mates to the junior school, and then go round the corner to the comp. And a lot of my mates were, I guess, a bit academic like me. And so outside of school, because we were doing well in school, we had the run of the school. We could do what we want. We had access to the metalwork lab, access to the pool, access to the physics lab, access to go canoeing and all that. And outside of school was very much the same. My grandparents lived about 4 miles away on my bike, backing onto a canal. So hosts of us would cycle round there, sit under their apple tree, swim in the canal, and my nan would make a lemon meringue pie. My neighbours were a lovely Sikh family, and when I got back, if I generally didn't eat my mum's terrible cooking, so I'd go around there and have an amazing vegetable curry every night, and meet the aunties and all sorts. So I wasn't wild and free in a sense that I was getting up to no good, but I had an incredibly open childhood and a huge amount of trust placed in me to do my own thing and just get on with it. Not by any choice by my parents, really. My mum was incredibly encouraging, speaks 3 languages, went to grammar school and then a finishing school in Austria, loved opera, and would always commit to whatever I was doing academically equally with me. Was really good at, I guess, challenging me, pushing around the edges and enhancing standards. And my dad worked nights in a tyre plant. So he trusted me by proxy, right? He was like, well, I need you to do this. I need that needs to do around the house, and I'll be asleep for 7 hours of your day, or just going to work as you're coming from school. So he was, and if he's doing double shifts, he was on 18-hour days. But I had my local grandparents who spoilt me and gave me lots of freedom. Had the wilderness in the middle of the West Midlands to do what I wanted in nature and outdoors. And I had my own bike, and it was the 70s. What are you going to say? Where's Dominic? I don't know. I think he's at Nan's. I'll ring her up. Oh, leave him. He'll be fine. See him on Thursday or whatever. So you kind of get used to testing your own boundaries and working it out.
Mm.
And then me and a couple of mates started a business when I was 14. So then you've got the business and the sort of sense of finance and transactions that you add on to your sort of life skills that you've acquired by, just buggering about and doing your own thing and, learning lessons with your mates. But then I think as you get your own kids, you do have to top up that innate sort of sense of doing the right thing with research, in my humble opinion. So if I was to go into a consultancy gig and I was going into, say, I don't know, Nintendo, if I didn't read up on their manufacturing distribution, how the Nintendo Switch works, how the Nintendo shop online works, what their key priorities were, where their offices were located, things about their culture and all that, I'd last a couple of days. Do you know who we are? I've heard of PlayStation. You wouldn't do it, would you? So you'd prepare yourself for a professional gig, and you'd prepare yourself if you were doing the Worthing 10K. So I really, really do believe that there are a ton of resources out there for dads, at all stages in your journey with your kids. So just hoover it up. And there's 2 things that I would very, very strongly recommend. Number one is Steve Biddulph's book, Raising Boys. I think he's now got Raising Girls as well, or Raising Children, and his Facebook pages and his podcast and everything that he radiates basically is positive and good and interesting, and some of it is very challenging at the same time. And then the second thing is the sort of I don't know where the theory comes from, but it's called the zone of proximal engagement. And it's basically, I think you draw 3 or 4 circles, and the middle one is stuff you can do very easily on your own. The next one out is stuff you could do very easily, but you might need to remind yourself how to do it with some, just in time or a source. You go, oh, that's how you get the chain back on a bike. After watching a YouTube video for 12 seconds, you go, oh, I remember now. Like logging into your router, another such horrific task that dads have to take on as part of their household IT support role. The third one is stuff that you find challenging, but with coaching and nudging, you can get there. And the fourth zone is stuff you can't do, but you should watch and blend across. And then you kind of draw a bubble or something in the middle of it. I can't remember the exact shape, but I can send you the link. It's just a 1-page diagram, and it's how to understand which zone your kids are operating in, and then how to support them accordingly. I mean, it's probably just some classic psychology, but somebody did it for me once, and I just thought, yeah, that's really interesting. Think about what are your kids doing now, and how can you move them along? So like I said, my daughter plays cello, so I'm just encouraging her rather than being a nag and going round and round and round and round and boring myself and her to death. I'm just saying to her, that's a great piece, but you repeat it every time you hit a snag, or you stop every time you hit a snag. Why don't you repeat the snag? And she may choose not to. She may choose to play the whole piece again from that point, but she's just getting into going do 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 overhang do 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 do, got that, and then moving on rather than playing the whole piece. So her practice is extended and she's working on her techniques. And then the second piece, I'm just saying, why don't we close the book for a second, see how much you can remember. So it's just introducing those nuggets in, isn't it? And that makes it interesting for you. Because if I just sit here and say to her, play the whole piece, yeah, that was great. Neither of us are engaged, and the time, I mean, literally drags on, right? So I guess what we're doing is we're armoring ourselves for those times that are tough or difficult or boring with a bit of research about what our children are going through and how to support them, and, you know, how to enjoy it or at least survive it ourselves.
That's brilliant, Dom. I think tons of value in what you've just shared there. Just rolling back, I mean, when you describe your childhood, it sounds like a really supportive environment for developing independent thinking, independent action. You know, you were trusted a lot. You had a lot of space. I'm curious about, you know, your dad being on night shifts and how your relationship together developed. Because I guess he was not around for a lot of the week. So, you know, how did that unfold for the two of you?
Well, he used to. Well, there's two things. If you had to ask me about my dad, there's two things I would say straight away. Number one is he loves chocolate eclairs, and he would love me to make. So I learned to make chocolate eclairs, and as an 11-year-old boy, right, that's like, you know, that's not something. So that's a sign of how much I, you know, love and respect him. So he would love waking up in the morning, having done, so he'd done two, he used to call it 2 till 10. So it's 2 in the afternoon till 10 o'clock at night. And then he would go to bed, he'd get up early in the morning because he might have to go in early. And his rolling shift would be 2 till 10. And then he would come home for an hour and a half or something at night, or have a shower and sleep on the job and then do another shift back to back. And he would love waking up to the smell of eclairs, or I'd put some in his lunchbox. Or I would just make 10 and he would just take them in to eat with his mates on their breaks. So that, and then the second thing is just the practical jokes. So relentless, I mean, the poor bugger, relentless practical jokes that I would commit to when he was utterly exhausted as well. So, you know, I guess we had a sort of and still have I guess I would call it a sort of ribald friendship. I wouldn't call it a parent-son relationship because I was growing up and he wasn't around, but he was around, and we were just mates. You know, he wasn't involved in a lot of the stuff that I did through school or anything. And if he'd come into the dining room and I was playing Call of Cthulhu, which is a role-playing game, and I had a red piece of cloth over the lamp and was doing a funny voice, and I'd just go, all right, Dom. And all my mates say, all right, Pete. And he would just walk through and go in the lounge and put the radio on, listen to the racing, or do, you know, dad stuff, watch a war film or something. So it was kind of like he was around. And now when I talk to him about stuff, I don't feel like I'm reporting into my dad or I'm asking him how he is from a son-dad sort of thing. It's more like mates. Now that sounds wonderful and simple and aren't you lucky and all that, but also I've never spoken to him about anything serious in my life, I don't think. So I had a precancerous growth in one of the layers between my colon and my skin, which came out as a small rash on my stomach that you might get if you were allergic to a belt buckle or something. But it annoyed me for a couple of months and then nearly a year. So I was like, look, I've had enough. I need to be referred. Or they referred me, and the guy doing the referral said, well, it's a sign of this, and you've got a big strap of this tissue underneath here, and we can get the scalpel out there and cut you open and all that. And they did it, and I've got a big scar there now, which I've healed from, thank God. But I don't think I've ever talked to my dad about that. And when I asked him about my sister's cancer on the back of her neck and all that, so I could find out what type it was, he was like, oh, talk to your mum about it. And it was like he kind of referred me to my mum as the parent, because it just, I don't know, psychology and all that, but maybe he doesn't feel like a parent because we don't have a sort of hierarchical relationship. And I don't know. It's very, very weird at times. I don't raise stuff with him, and also if I don't really expect him to give me an answer either. So, as well as it being great and good, I had loads of time my mates had the freedom, my grandparents and all that. There was no one to sort of, I don't know, take Simba and show him around the forest, or some dad's child analogy that I'm struggling to conjure up. Right? There's no kind of like, hey, I'm taking the carburetor out of my V8. Why don't you come and hold the spanner? Or I don't know, I'm fitting the carpet in the spare room. Why don't you help me out? Or I'm going to the speedway with my mates. Why don't you come along? Because he struggled with having a friends network as well. So his friends, and they all worked in a factory, so it was necessarily, a certain type of guy, and it was probably a bit rough and ready. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're all lovely people, drop everything to do whatever they want for the family and us for them and all that. But when he went to the football club with his mates and got drunk and smoked and played the fruities, I'm not saying he never invited me, didn't want me along, but it was his time with his mates, and it was partition, and there was probably loads of this about that, and stuff that he probably didn't want his slightly intellectual son to hear and all that, or that my mum wouldn't like if she heard it from me. So that was his downtime, and that was his out of his factory time, and that was his relaxation, and I wasn't in that. And I think when I talk to other mates, I think that that's not normal, is it? Or, well, what's normal? But that's very different. Because I've never had it, I miss it. When I think about it, I think, I do miss that. And he never took me under his wing and then took me into those male bonding scenarios to talk about the things that males talk about and bond and all that. And so is that something I'm lacking, or did I get it elsewhere? I'm talking about, there's a big difference between your mates and their slightly older brothers and your dad, right?
Of course.
And
yeah. How's that playing out now with Loic? Have you made some active choices to, be? He's in that sort of same age right now, isn't he? Of that sort of rites of passage and coming into manhood. How have you tackled that, or how are you tackling it?
Blimey. I don't think I've got a plan that I could share.
Damn it! I was hoping.
No, I am a walking Excel spreadsheet, but not in that area. In everything I do at work. Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? If I could and to share with your listeners, man. And obviously, I've got a Patreon fund for everyone.
Of course.
No, I think with him, I mean, I have to say to my wife, and it turns out to be true, the answer to everything with a boy that age is a big cuddle and some humour, because he can get very, very serious and locked into his opinion very, very easy and very simply. So if you'd start a logic argument with him, or you start to disagree with him, what's the point, right? That's gonna go only one way, and he's just gonna get more distressed. And then the more distressed he gets, the further down the ladder he goes, the longer he's got to get out, and the more he has to recognize he's got to get out, and the chance of him getting out are less, and that's a sort of self-defeating or spiral or something like that. So I'm actively being very warm and kind with him at all times, no matter what he does, and probably as a consequence of that, he doesn't get into much trouble. So it's very sort of it sounds very sort of bright and woo and soft and all that, I think that's the first thing. I'm very calm and relaxed with him because he doesn't need an agitator, right? He's got enough going on with his hormones and his and his crazy mates and his life and girls and all that for me to get into that state with him. And then the second thing is that sort of, I guess the flip side of that is I spend a long time explaining to him what my standards are around whatever it is. Now, language, behavior, friends, cleaning up, homework, talking to his sister, hygiene, focus when we go out, being in the moment. I spent ages and ages and ages, it seems like, explaining to him what those standards are, simply because when I need him to click in a little bit and adhere to those standards, we can say, there was that situation where I had to remind you about that, and I have said to you before about these things, but in a softly fashion, right? And it's a bit like the age-old argument of, I mean, you know, your kids are a bit younger, but it's like, you've given the answer to the question to your homework, but you need to show some of your working out, and your general presentation needs to be better. And in the exam that you've got coming in some future state that you can't even imagine, that's going to be a large proportion of your time or the mark or whatever. And, well, no, but the teacher said, or in class we did, and, you know, it's please let me short circuit. But I think unless you build those standards up, you know, we go to the football with my brother-in-law and he's on his phone. I have to say, remember we talked about, you know, you putting that away and being in the moment with the family. I know you don't like football that much, but why don't you talk to Nick about what he's cooking for Sunday roast, or Al sat next to you, you know, he's an architect. And there's very little football to watch at the Albion, you know, 0-0 or 1-0. So you can talk about anything you want, really. And then the final thing is I encourage him not to just, how can I put this without making him sound like a sort of, I encourage him not to just say, I've seen this on YouTube, or I did this in Fortnite, but to wrap a little bit of more humanity around some of the things in which he says. So instead of just repeating stuff he's seen, I encourage him to tell a story, or start with the person. So rather than saying, oh, this kid at school has got blisters all over his hands because of, you know, using sanitizer all the time, and it's about 2.5 seconds, I'm like, well, I don't say to him, tell the story differently. I just help him understand what I'm looking for when he's sharing an anecdote, and giving him the time to sort of bounce that around. And when I hear him tell my brother-in-law, when we see him in the afternoon, oh, there's this kid, Ramon, at school. His grandparents live with him, and they're very elderly and Pakistani. They don't speak very much English at all, and they've become obsessed with keeping him safe over coronavirus. So they squirt him all the time with hand sanitizer, and he's got a really strong one they bought for him, which I think is too strong. It's like 90%, which they insisted he uses at school, and they questioned him about it, and he started getting blisters on his hands about it. He could barely write. Now that's, how long was that? 20 seconds? But then my brother-in-law can interject, and he can have some banter as well as understanding Luke's position. And you know, at the end, you get the banter, and then you go, well, how do you feel about your mate being in that situation? And, you know, he's got some social kudos, and he's got something to say.
Nice.
And even if, I'm not saying he's this raconteur, but at least he's got something to sort of express. And so me listening to him, which is one of the key skills with a young boy at that age, because they can just, I mean, you know, when your kids go through the noisy age, right, from when they're born until they leave home, you can often be like, oh my God, I can't wait till they're teenagers, they shut themselves in their room. And like, we just go up into the room, play Fortnite with his friends, and make loads of noise and be social with his friends through Fortnite or Call of Duty or Doom World or whatever the hell he's playing this week and all that. But he isn't interacting with the family, and those skills, running a team or a crew and commanding them around, don't necessarily come out into the real world. And I could just let him go to his room. I could let him maybe dinner in there. I could let him get up in the morning, dress himself, go to school, do schoolwork, do his homework, and then stay in there. But that isn't going to serve him well in, you know, in the future, and then, you know, me listening and then helping him understand what people are listening for and how they want to talk to him is really, really valuable time for us, I think. And he'll never come out and say, oh, I really appreciate that, or that was brilliant and all that. But I just see the effects in his behaviors with me and with others. And that's, I mean, that's one thing that Stephen Biddulph goes on about in his book with kids between 11 and 14, that you talking to them as a dad and then seeing you as not an authority figure, but someone that, you know, they can track and learn from and cares and listens to them is really critical. And, you know, just finally on this point, Matt, it drives his relationship with my wife as well. So I don't think if I was kind of using my hands slightly ahead of him and giving him those skills and time and all that, not that I'm some magician, but just helping him work him through all that, then I feel that those wouldn't be transferred into his relationship with my wife. And then that might be a very different relationship if he heard from his mates at school that, oh, you know, she's just a walking washing machine, or, you know, there's a lot of disrespectful conversations amongst lads about their moms and or women in general. And then personally, I think that would it's a very easy relationship to just become a sort of, not master and servant, but it's a very functional relationship between lads and their mums if you're not careful. And I think as a dad, it's part of your responsibility in the family to help young men, you know, at work and all places, and your son in particular, understand that, you know, we're not just two blokes in the house, and, you know, my wife lives here as well. You know, with the dynamic relationship and having respect for her and all that is a sidestep from him having respect for me and for himself.
There's so much wisdom in what you've shared. I wish we could go on longer, Dom, but we've reached the end of the time, and it's been such a rich conversation. Really appreciate what you've brought to it in every sense, and it's left me with lots of thoughts and questions. And maybe you'd like to come back again another time, and we can continue the conversation, because there's more to explore there.
Thanks for the invite. Maybe we'll do sort of 6 months' time when I've how's the coronavirus going in your house, and we'll do a multicast.
Yeah, we could do. So if people want to find out more about you,
incredibly rewarding. Thank you for inviting me on. I really appreciate you reaching out through social media and asking for people to join this, and being so open to me being on here today. I found it incredibly useful.
Oh, I've really enjoyed it too, Dom, and appreciated everything you shared. And if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
I'm on LinkedIn, Dominic Mason, and I'll share the URL with you so you can attach it to this podcast.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Dom.
Thank you very much. Bye.